let's talk about the breakdown of communication when it comes to uncertainty.
So one of the challenges with uncertainty is that it increases defensiveness. And defensiveness is the bane of successful communication.
So let's talk about for a second. I mean, because that's a big statement, right? So the reason why
today is big statement day.
The reason why it increases defensiveness is because uncertainty means you can't predict how to behave to be successful.
Yep.
And so you're automatically more defensive. This is why the primary job of a manager, in my estimation, is creating predictability. So that way your people know how to behave to get the rewards that they want.
Yeah. And defensiveness, when it enters conversations, causes a fairly predictable pattern. The one person wants to have a conversation about something important. You know, hey, I think we're making a mistake with the way that we're approaching. And let's just start using some actual business examples because we see this all the time. We've had a lot of our clients change their compensation pay, the way that they're paying their employees, to be more incentive-based for the work they're actually doing. This is, I dare say, sweeping healthcare, where most providers of healthcare are now getting paid in part on how many people they see.
And the challenge with that is that whenever you're changing payment and just in general rewards, you are going to have an impact on culture.
Yeah, and it's destabilizing. It creates a gigantic amount of unpredictability, and it's easy to get wrong. But when people are, let's take just an example of, this is playing out in a number of places that we work.
Right. I fielded a text message a few weeks ago, and it was somebody I've been coaching for years, and they were enraged that they were and they were like, if I'm getting paid less, I'm out the door. And I wrote back and I said, I'm 1,000% certain that you're not the person who has to worry about this because you're a top performer. And they're actually trying, I think, without having had a direct conversation with the people who made the decision, they're actually trying to get the disparity between providers fixed by doing this incentive system. So that way you're not sitting there on conversations with me, which we've had, talking about how you're carrying all the weight and these other people are still getting their fixed salary.
Right.
And that had that person come back and be like the next day, okay, you're probably right.
Yeah, we've seen in the last 2 years, 5 different organizations. 6. I learned of another one last week. 6 different, and that's probably a low number, significantly alter their pay scheme. And they're not all in healthcare, to basically encourage employees to have more skin in the game. And in every case, even the employees who are going to make more money, it's nerve-wracking. And you lose a percentage of people who in the new system would actually make more money, but they can't handle the uncertainty.
Right, because people will take a bad outcome that is certain over a possible good outcome that is uncertain.
Yeah, kind of classic research.
Which is really why that second piece where like you're assessing how sure you are of your prediction is actually important, because the more uncertain you are, the more likely you are to cave.
Right. And quit and go take a different job, even though you love your colleagues, you love the work, the commute is good, and you're going to make more money. You'll go and take another job somewhere offering you a guaranteed salary because of the predictability and a certain amount of the stability that's embedded in that. I mean, at some point, if we want to tackle it, we can do a whole discussion on compensation. Here, we're just using it as it's a gigantic booster or
it's a destabilizer of organizations, amplifier of uncertainty, because your pay impacts your whole life. Like we need money to pay for things.
And when we talk to people who are in the middle of a pay change, just to use this as an example, they become very defensive. And that's on both sides. And so we sit in between employees having their pay messed with and the leaders actually doing this work, a lot of times as consultants. And the employees question the leaders. Like, simple question. Well, how much is y'all's pay changing too? And then the leaders become super defensive. And then they're like, well, we're already paid. We're already paid based on our performance, and like it's already biting. And if we don't get this right, we're going to get fired. And the whole thing is already off the rails because of how easy it is in uncertainty for people to become defensive, which then triggers common pattern. One person gets defensive, the other person concludes this is not a safe conversation. I'm going to back off and withhold. Or fight, which is even worse, meaning verbally, or back off and withhold, which either one of those either escalates or causes frustration in the other person. Then they double down on, let me push a little harder. And it can be very hard to have a helpful, useful conversation. The things that people need, as you mentioned, the predictability, stability, the things that people need in uncertainty is an acknowledgement of, I get it. I understand why you feel this way. Here's what we actually know as it relates to the pay. Here's what's actually going to happen. And then you have to sit down with every person and line this whole thing out. And then you have to say, call me. You're going to have other questions. Like you basically, as a leader, have to prepare yourself for having a similar conversation with the same person probably 2 to 3 times to reduce their uncertainty enough.
And to help build trust in what they've done.
That's right.
Because the truth is that like changing compensation is really difficult, and it's very likely that the change doesn't go as thought. And so, the leadership needs to, with any big change, you need to periodically check in and see if you're getting the outcome that you expected to get. We did a whole episode on this, rewarding for A and getting B, which is a famous article. But like these things are so hard that like the likelihood that you would just set it and go and be perfect just doesn't really happen in reality.
Right. Or that you be able to have one conversation and we just do it. That's not how it works. I mean, if I can speak for both of us on this, our central advice when people are contemplating a pay change, and usually there's a very good reason for doing it, like the business needs to, something has changed. I mean, basically, just to use the one industry that we're in a lot in healthcare, it went from back in the old days, the doctor hung out a shingle. And so they had all the risk. They saw the patients, they made the money, they didn't. And then for a variety of reasons, but eventually around the time of the Affordable Care Act, it became more physicians fell up under big organizations.
That was kind of pushed by the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah. And so
it was very hard to be an independent physician after that.
And so you had more people now, more physicians who used to hang a shingle out being under big not conglomerate's not the right word, but gigantic
it's just an organization.
Healthcare.
They're under an organization. They're no longer basically a one-man shop with a few employees.
Yeah.
They're now under a CEO and CFOs.
And a lot of those guaranteed pay early on, and they don't do that as much anymore.
Right. You actually, in a weird way, the doctors are going back to what they were originally, which was they're getting paid for what they do.
Yes.
But when they traded that in, I think some of that stress was what they traded in.
That's right.
And now they got to work for their dinner, but also they don't have any control.
That's right. Yeah, not only
it's relatively worse than the shingle.